Okay. Good evening and welcome to a meeting of the Scrutiny Committee of Melton Borough Council. Members are reminded that we will be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate that they wish to speak, and to use their microphones when speaking for the benefit of all present. The microphone is live when the red light displays. Please switch mobile phones to silent. Should you need to leave the room during the meeting, unless it is an emergency evacuation, when emergency exits should be used, please use the marked exit and entrance. I will now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. Public recording of the meeting. There is legislation that allows the public to film, record, or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. I'm Councillor Robert Child and I'm the Chair of the Scrutiny Committee, and I confirm that the following members are present and participating in this meeting. Councillors Siggy Atherton, Steve Carter, Prue Chandler, Jeannie Douglas, Christopher Evans, Elaine Holmes, Pam Posnett, Tim Webster, and Jacob Wilkinson. We also welcome the leader of the council, Councillor Joe Orson, the portfolio holder for corporate governance and resources, Councillor Ronnie de Burle, portfolio holder for climate access and engagement, Councillor Alison Freer, as well as other members who have joined us in person this evening. I don't think there are any others, no. In addition to this, we have the following council officers in attendance: the Chief Executive, Ed de Coverley, the Director for Housing and Communities, the Deputy Chief Executive, Michelle Howard, the Director for Corporate Services, Dawn Garton, the Director for Growth and Regeneration, Pranali Paraka, Assistant Director for Resources, David Scott, Senior Democratic Services and Scrutiny Officer, Adam Green, and the Democratic Services Officer, Sarah Evans. Right, we'll move on to the agenda. Apologies for absence. There are none as far as I know. Minutes. I invite a proposer and seconder to confirm the minutes of the scrutiny meeting held on the 22nd of November 22 and the minutes of the special scrutiny meeting held on the 11th of January 23. With regard to the 22nd of November one, can I have a show of hands to say they are all correct? That's Jacob and Siggy. All in favour? That's that one. Thank you. On the special scrutiny meeting held on the 11th of January, a slight alteration. They are minuted correctly on debt management, but when the tenancy service manager outlined the position, he said he estimated that the number of tenants in arrears was between 800 and 900. We asked him to put a figure on it so we had an idea, and he explained that some of the tenants pay their rent using housing benefit, which pays 4 weeks in arrears, and that's minuted correctly. However, I've since found out that housing benefit is paid weekly direct to the rent account, and it's the universal credit which is paid 4 weekly in arrears. So that's just for noting, but I'm happy with the minutes as they were described at the meeting. All in favour? Yes, certainly. Councillor Carter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've just got one on. I've been reading through. It says a member raised concerns. Can we have the member's name, please, when we concerns?
I
Instead of
don't
a
think
member.
I don't think that's a process we actually follow. It's this is normally how they are minuted.
Because how can we say, Chair, who's raised that concern if it's just got a member? It's got
Well, that it is minuted as per normal,
right.
Without names. Okay. So all in favour of those minutes? Certainly. Councillor Holmes.
It might be a new thing. We seem to have new things all the time, but it used to say members, the members who the members' names, like it did in planning and everything else. So I cannot understand why it hasn't. And I think it shows to the general public, they read these, that some of the members actually are very caring and know what they're talking about. Thank you.
And participating. Thank you. Anyone else? Any comments on the minutes? Can we say all in favour? Okay, the minutes are passed. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes, so there was yourself, Councillor Evans, and Councillor, was it Webster or Carter, wasn't it? You weren't at that meeting. You were here. You're right. So it was Councillor Webster, probably. Were you at the right? Where's that? Yeah, we'll just check who wasn't there. Yeah, there was the two. Yes, Pam and Chris. Yeah, thank you. Declarations of interest. I invite members who wish to do so to make declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. Has anybody got an item on the agenda that they have an interest in? No. Councillor Posner.
Only my usual one if we talk about Leicestershire County Council.
Thank you.
County councillors. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's noted. Councillor Evans.
To come back on this, but the minutes of that meeting that you've just got before us on the 24th of January, it's confusing for the public because it says in 47 a personal interest from respect to Councillor Posner was noted, but you just said that wasn't there. You just said you weren't there.
It's always there because in the county.
Yeah, it is a standard.
Oh, right. Even if you're not there.
Yeah, it's a standard.
My recollection was that you were at that meeting because, because it was in CC2 and I remember you attending.
You had.
I can check the video.
I got a feeling you were there for that meeting. That's right. You're absolutely, yeah. Anyway, we'll move on. Review of the forward plan, which is item 4. Just check the forward plan. Has anyone got any comments to make on the forward plan? The only comment I would comment on, I'm pleased to see the corporate charging policies on there, which we discussed last week. Corporate debt write-offs, that's for the 8th of February, so that's pleased to see that going forward. And the feasibility study of the cemetery, that seems to be chugging along. I remember at this time last year, this very meeting, we raised that, and it's took 12 months to get to this stage. Would anyone like to comment on that? Yeah, Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Chairman. When I was elected in 2003, one of the first meetings I attended was about having a new cemetery in Melton Mowbray. We did talk about an extension on Doctors Lane when that development was built, but the cost of this has just been astronomical ever since. I mean, people in Melton now have dreams of having a crematorium, I think, but I think that's gone out of the window. I can't see how that can ever be financed, but even to buy the land for a new cemetery and all that has to go with it, it'll be an absolutely phenomenal cost. And I think it does need pushing forward this.
Well, Cabinet are considering a date for decision 12th of April. So that will be
Well, it'll be 20 years then from when it was first discussed, when Councillor Posnett and I.
Yeah. Thank you for that. But 12th of April is the actual.
And there is one other point on contract exemption dog kennelling services. It gives Victoria Clark as the service manager.
Yeah, that was a typing mistake. Yeah. Thank you. So everybody happy with the?
Councillor Child, may I just come in relation to the cemetery item? So I just want to confirm the progress that has been made. So it was part of this process last year that there was a request for some work around feasibility of that. That feasibility work was commissioned, as you know, and we've been progressing that. And that has resulted in a piece of work to look at the possible feasibility for crematorium, feasibility for a future cemetery site, which, as Councillor Chandler points out, is a significantly costly piece of work, but also to make sure that we could do anything we could to really maximise the capacity and lifespan of the existing site. A proposal has been taken to Cabinet members to extend the capacity of the existing site, and the growth bid is included within the budget proposals before you this evening to do that. So then the ongoing piece of work is around the costings and feasibility work for a new cemetery. So I just want to give some assurance that that work has been progressing, and the next stage of that is included within your pack this evening. Thank you.
Joel, appreciate it. Any more questions on the forward plan? Chris, please. Councillor Evans.
Thank you. On page 12, I don't know why not before 6th of January is very popular. On page 12, the new leases for digital advertising seems to be completely different in that it suggests on the 6th of January 2023 a decision was made. Is that correct, or should it read not before 6th of January 2023? The leases for digital advertising hoardings. 12.
6th of January 23.
Oh, yeah, no, that's
Page 12.
That
should be
It's
before,
page
that
12.
should not
That's what I've got.
Yeah.
What you've got.
That's the one for the digital advertising should be not before.
It should say not
Yeah,
before. That's what I thought
yeah,
was the
yeah.
case.
Absolutely
I
right.
presume so.
Yeah,
Because obviously there's some kind of
Yeah.
embargo up till then or something. I don't know what it is. Is that okay?
Basically, the decision yet to be made, and
Yeah.
at the time of the publication of the forward plan, which was the 6th
So
of
it wasn't-
January.
yeah. So it wasn't
Yes.
made on the 6th of
No,
January?
no.
Okay. Could I just ask the other question, the supplementary to that was, I know we recently went through the leisure procurement, which is going out to tender, obviously, and all the rest of it. Is that coming back to scrutiny once it's actually gone out to tender, or is, because you were asking that, I believe, Chair, and I couldn't remember if that was the case.
On the forward plan, it says a decision date is due on the 8th of February with regards to that. Page 18, which is on the bottom, not on the side.
Councillor Child.
Leisure procurement is still shown as 8th of February. Is that right?
It is. So we committed to go away to have a look at the project plan when we had the workshop session to see whether or not there was time to bring the draft procurement strategy back to scrutiny committee. There isn't. However, what we will commit to do is engage with members prior to contract awards. So there's still an awful lot of work that goes into that process. But we are obviously reflecting the comments of scrutiny into that document, and then we will be discussing that with cabinet in due course. Thank you.
That actually, because I do remember the regeneration manager saying there might not be enough time at that point. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Councillor Holmes.
I'm not happy with that at all. Not at all. Cabinet seem to be able to write off things. They do all sorts of things that we, the councillors, don't want to happen, and we want more debate about it. And I am not happy about this. We have gone on and on about the sports facilities. Our fellow councillor here and I have gone on and on. We know how much waste there has been, total and utter waste. And I can tell you, I won't bother now, but I can tell you lots of things that have been wasted up at the upper school, etc. And quite frankly, I am not happy at all. And I think we ought to come back to scrutiny. I know you haven't got very much time, but it ought to come back to scrutiny because we are losing so much money. And I really think it ought to be an all-member discussion, not just the cabinet. Thank you.
Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. It's my understanding that any final contract would come to full council. Is that correct? Yeah.
I believe that is correct. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. A question as regards page 13, the lease of Thorpe End car park to Arla Foods to facilitate a lease. Is that a continuation of the existing lease? Please, I'm the ward councillor for that area, so I just would like to know.
Pranali. Thank you.
So it is continuation, but this is a revised lease with revised conditions. So we are getting a slightly better financial benefit from the new revision of the lease.
Thank you. Thank you.
No more questions. Then we'll move on to the work programme. Work programme on page 23. Can you just update me, Pranali, on the climate change one? When are we expected to hear from that? I know the work has been a bit behind, but have we got an update on when it will come to committee?
So forgive me, I haven't got the date, but it is part of the scrutiny's work program to have a separate session on the climate change agenda. I don't have the date. Do you know when it is coming?
Don't believe we've set it yet. So we'll speak about that later.
Okay, so in terms of the timescales, there are parallel few pieces of work being done for the climate change agenda. So we did a consultation last year to begin the climate change strategy work, which so that work was finished. The draft strategy will go out for a public consultation summer this year. And before that, we intend to bring it to the scrutiny committee before we go out for consultation. So that should be around June, July time. But in parallel, the team is working on improving, receiving grant money from the government and improving energy efficiency in public sector homes as well as for the council own housing. So that work is continuing, and we also work with the Leicestershire County Council in working on their climate change strategy and considering how it will impact upon our local context. So there's a fair amount of work going on, but the consultation and the strategy will commence later in summer this year.
Councillor Chandler.
I put which year on here because it's very vague. Last Tuesday, Councillor Pritchett and I met with the chairman of the Bottisford Climate Change Group, and they are years ahead of this. I mean, I'm most impressed that they're working with Nottingham University, Leicester University, Leicestershire County Council, the flood people, and the Environment Agency and the Flood Authority at Leicester. And it's most impressive. And I mean, we just seem to be stalling here. And, you know, a small group of enthusiasts, basically. I mean, the chairman, he was a lead writer for the Farmers Weekly, and he knows his stuff on land and flooding and that sort of thing. But I was most impressed with what they're doing, and they're having group meetings within the village. And I think, quite frankly, you should invite them in and tell them to take a lead on this, because we just go nowhere. It's been an agenda item now for 2 or 3 years, and we're still no further on.
The comment, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. It's my understanding that the work was put on hold due to COVID response. Is that correct?
Well, I would say, yes, work has been on hold for the last 3 months after we did the first stage of consultation, but it has restarted again. It's not due to COVID response. I mean, we are out of COVID now. It was simply due to the staff capacity issues, but we have started the work again, and the next consultation is planned for, as I say, in summer this year.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As just been said, that we're trying to save, et cetera, as much as we can, and we care about climate change. Can anybody tell me how much the solar panels have actually made for this council, the ones that are on the roof here? I do believe they are connected now, aren't they? Thank you.
No idea. Pranali, can you help there?
So yes, they are connected, and they are being used to heat up the water within the building. I haven't got a number in front of me in terms of how much it has saved, but I can look into it and come back. Yeah.
Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Climate change. We can't really have an excuse for this. We know the public agenda. We know what our top politicians are saying and all the rest of it. It's very important for public bodies to set the example to the rest, and we're not doing it. We've got no examples. So when I look in anything, LGA or anything, other councils are setting examples. They may be small beer, but they're still, it's endemic in everything they think about, whether it's council housing, cars, transport, everything. You cannot make any decisions, even leisure. It should be underlying everything we do with the leisure procurement should have in it. And we need to make certain that this is getting as close as we can to improving things to make, because lots of energy is wasted there. Every decision we make, climate change should be on that decision. We cannot hold back with committees thinking about it and all the rest of it. It's embarrassing. It is beyond belief, because our next generation will not forgive us if we sit here in Melton, spend lots of money on the cattle market and all the rest of it, where we haven't got a bottom line that says, and we're making certain we're getting as low as we can be on energy use in all of these decisions. And that worries me. I've seen time after time the agenda of this committee, of these committees, not having climate change. It's so important, because we do it now. Everybody who's an expert, a scientist, says we do it now or we pay the cost later. We cannot sit here and carry on worrying about, I'm sorry, Dawn, 100k, 200k a year, because it won't matter how much money we've got. In the end, we'll be in real trouble if we don't do it now, Chair. Thank you.
Totally agree. Councillor Wilkinson, did you want to come in here?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say that we made a decision at full council in October 2019 to set up a working group and to start doing this work. So that's nearly 4 years ago. And I believe that the council employs a climate change officer to carry out this work. How long has that person been in post? Albeit I know that we do share that officer with Obi and Wigston.
Yeah, it is shared, and I know there's been resources problems, but can you?
So I haven't got exact date in front of me, but I think the climate change officer, which is a shared post, as you pointed out, with Woodby and Wixton Council, that has been in place now for over 18 months. And the first, so if you remember, councillors, we did a baseline study. We undertook a study of the mapping out all the carbon emissions of from all the services that council undertakes. That work has been completed. We have worked out that to reach our ambition of meeting the being carbon neutral by 2030, that ambition, what we need to do now, and that action plan is being prepared. The climate change strategy, which we are talking about being delayed, is an additional piece of work that talks not just about the council's operations or actions, but that will give a wider strategic approach and understanding of what needs to be done by Melton's communities and businesses and residents. So that's a much wider piece of work. But the work the council needs to do is already undergoing, and the climate change officer is the one responsible for delivering the projects, which are, we have spent about 300,000 pounds in improving energy efficiency in private sector homes. These are particularly difficult circumstances in the sense that these are fuel poor homes with low income households. So we have really helped out about 26 homes in the past 6 months, and we have just received, well, we are about to start another project with a 500,000 £1,000 allocation, working in partnership with Leicestershire County Council. We have identified 46 properties that need improvement within our borough. So there is a lot of work being undertaken in parallel, but yes, the strategy is and will be a priority for the next 6 months.
Can I ask, would it be too much trouble to see a spreadsheet with procedure and action date so we can see how you anticipate it moving forward, and then members will be able to have this and ask it periodically how it's progressing against that those days? Will that be possible?
Yes, absolutely. I will provide an update to all members on the work already being done. Yeah. Councillor
Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, it is something that I am so keen on. And I am sure, I'm so pleased that we've got the leader of the council here, because I am sure that the chair and vice chair of planning would actually love to have had the directive to have not allowed any housing, any in this borough, without there being solar tiles on each house. All right, it might have cost a little more, but they would have done it. And each house would then have had some sort of heating. They could heating the water. It's amazing. And that could have happened. And we have let this happen just willy-nilly, letting so many houses be built. And I am sure that the chair of planning would agree with me but we're told, oh, you can't do that. Well, why not? Of course we can. Yes, of course we can. If we put down a marker, we could have done it. And I think it's a disgrace that we haven't. I feel really, really sorry for people that are living in, especially the cheaper houses. It makes such a difference. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Posnett.
Can I just suggest a very quick win that the majority of members won't like is you ditch these and you get everything on your iPad. You know, it costs a fortune to print these. How many rainforests do you think we destroy in 12 months? So to me, that's the first quick win that you can do.
Yeah. We'll move on to, sorry, Councillor Evans.
Sorry to go on, Chair. First of all, before I go any further, I see homelessness is coming up, very important from my personal point of view, and I'm very glad. And I know we've got a Director of Housing and Communities who's daily doing great things for the people who are in vulnerable positions, and I know she does each week successfully do things. Climate change, I just need to go back to this. it's to be confirmed. We need a date and we need a quick date. I think you only have to look to the actual agreed by the chairman. It's a year ago, and we're still sitting here with nothing. And I'm sorry, I don't accept that this should take this long. It's just too long. There's no actions. I've seen nothing by this council directly coming from this initiative, and we need to see it soon. And I'm sorry, Chair, it should be, you know, within the next month or two.
Well, there's a spreadsheet with action dates on. Well, we're seeing that in about what, 4 or 5 weeks. So if that can be done for the next meeting, okay, lovely. Thank you. We'll move on. Anything else on the work programme? I think that's pretty well covered. It. The homelessness, 16th of March, Chris. Yep, that's the Councillor Posner.
I'd just like to say a few words about the waste strategy. I think the waste strategy that we've got with all the districts in the county working together is really good. The question I need to ask Melton is, because I've been told that we're not going to do the food collection, which is part of the waste strategy. So if we're not doing it, does that mean that we're not part of the whole strategy with all the districts and the county council?
And then is that government funding is the key to whether this goes ahead. And we heard from the Deputy Chief Executive. Am I right on that, Michelle? It all depends on the government funding.
So yes, what we obviously discussed at the scrutiny meeting is those pledges are in place for all of the councils as part of the Leicester Waste Partnership, and that 2 of those pledges in particular were caveated being subject to total and ongoing government funding, one of which was the food waste collection. So
Not that I'm in favour of it, because I'm not. I can't think of anything worse, but it's a different matter.
Will now provide an introductory presentation on the budget development process before handing over to the Director of Corporate Services. This presentation has been seen by the majority of scrutiny, and I understand the spreadsheets haven't been altered dramatically since then. Is that right? So we'll try and whip through the presentation. Sorry, it's the same one, and we'll take any questions after the general fund budget and medium-term financial strategy is considered. So over to the Chief Executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Just, as the Chair has mentioned, just wanted to give a bit of context really around the budget development process before handing over to Dawn to talk through some of the specifics, and then obviously move into the discussion around the various papers you've got before you this evening. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So obviously the starting point for any budget development is your corporate strategy. So that's the aspirations we've set ourselves, as was approved in 2020 and runs through to 2024. And so the budget is designed around facilitating delivery of those priorities. Obviously also around delivering the existing service offer, but recognizing that we've also got to balance our finances and maintain financial stability, keep looking for efficiency and making sure that what we're doing is value for money. So there's a constant kind of churn and requirement to check and challenge ourselves and make sure we're doing everything in the best possible way. In terms of where we are as an organisation, we have been able to deliver 3 years of balanced budgets, which is really encouraging. So despite all the kind of turbulence of COVID and the instability, we've managed to navigate that reasonably well. But we continue to have the challenge of relatively modest reserves. So we are more susceptible to shocks than most, though last year we were able to put some money back into our reserves, which again will help with that. Obviously this year particularly, we've got the added challenge of cost of living, inflation, and all that put a lot of pressure on this year's budget. And there was a time when we were projecting quite significant overspends, which we have managed to reduce and get back to a position of relative balance again. So that thankfully has been largely mitigated. In terms of the key inputs to the budget that you've got before you tonight, obviously the finance settlement is one of the key drivers for that, and that was announced just before Christmas, as always. And that was broadly in line with our expectations, but was still 7K less than last year. So you may have seen some of the national noise or announcements around kind of significant increase in spending power for councils. Whilst that may be true across the sector, it wasn't necessarily reflected in the year-on-year settlement change for Melton, but it was largely what we expected. Thankfully, there was better news in terms of business rates retention, and that was more favourable than we'd anticipated. That is helping to offset some of the budgetary pressures that we were anticipating, because there are still risks inherent, and we've perhaps picked up a couple of those tonight already. So leisure, the sector is under real pressure, and that certainly extends to Melton, and will certainly have a bearing on the procurement process we have to go through. Planning income is being squeezed, and car park income still hasn't recovered to pre-COVID levels. The silver lining really to the challenging situation is through the UK Share Prosperity Fund. So as you'll be aware, our plan was approved and does provide an additional £1.2 million for us to use over the next 2.5 years. And that plan is being firmed up, and we're starting to look to implement those proposals over the coming months. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So the way in which we propose to address the deficit that we are projecting in this year's budget, and Dawn will speak to that in a moment when she gets into the detail, is not by knee-jerking, not by overreacting, because thankfully the deficit is not so significant that it should give us that kind of cause for concern, but nevertheless it is a deficit, and it is one that we need to work to address. And so what we are proposing to do is to, and this is an ongoing process, is to bring forward options and ideas that can help manage that in a sensible way, that protect our services as far as possible and remove the need for us to make more arbitrary cuts and more difficult cuts that harm the provision that we want to provide to our residents. So this is the process that we are working through at the moment, and the idea is that we will bring back proposals by April, which seek to address the gap that Dawn is going to talk to in a minute, which, not to kind of steal Dawn's thunder, is in the order of £140,000. So that's the kind of magnitude of deficit that we need to try and address. If you can move to the next slide, please. I'm just going to share with you the areas, the themes really that we're going to be looking at. Sorry, next slide, please. Thank you. So these are a few of the areas that we've been discussing with Cabinet that we're keen to have a look at. So the first one, this is a general management principle, really is around vacancy management. So checking challenging vacancies as they arise, not necessarily just going for like recruitment, but asking ourselves, is this the current role still right in its current form? Do we need it? Can we do something different? And that's an ongoing process. Procurement is another area. Obviously, we have some sizable contracts, for example, with BIFA. So looking at how we can reduce cost or extract more value from those contracts is an area, again, that we are looking at. Service reviews, I mentioned earlier, this need to constantly review and check and challenge how we're doing things and whether we can do things better. So we have a developing service review program, and the areas where we're looking at for those at the moment are around customer services. And looking at things like the post room and administration and the reception and processes and systems, picking up perhaps some of the points that Councillor Posnett made a moment ago about trying to reduce print costs, both for cost and for environmental reasons. Case management, looking at the relationship there between the general fund and HRA and how that's financed, and is it financed in the right way. Caretaking, making sure we're matching need and capacity. And then also leisure, as I've mentioned, is an area that we need to focus on, both in terms of the current contract we have and making sure we're getting as much value from that as possible, but also as we prepare to procure a new contract. Next slide, please. And then in terms of the other areas we're keen to look at, so commercial, as you'll appreciate, and the chair already mentioned the fees and charges report. That's an area that we continually challenge ourselves on, and we'll again look at that over the coming months. Are there areas where we can increase return on investment? So we have a very positive service that we provide on behalf of a number of councils in relation to procurement. So we are actively talking with a set of other councils about potentially bringing them into that arrangement, so we can increase the income we gain from that service, and then looking at various things around utilising or possibly implementing permits for HRA properties, and also making sure we get as much value from the cattle market as we can. Collaboration, looking at opportunities to work with other councils on shared initiatives, things that may increase resilience or may cut costs. So that's something that we will continue to pursue and review. Asset development program, I know that's been something that this committee has taken a keen interest in and had opportunity to discuss previously. There are a number of work streams, as you can see, that we are actively working on at the moment on that, and we anticipate one of those around Parkside coming forward to Cabinet in the next month. So there's active progress in terms of trying to bring forward some things that will right size our estate and bring as much value and income to that estate as possible. The final one, which is referred to in your report tonight, is around the business rates pool. And this is just to highlight that there are opportunities that potentially additional income will come into Melton through discussions with the other districts, county and city. We retain a surplus of growth through a pooling arrangement with those councils in business rates. And there's a reasonable amount of money that needs to be divided up between the different councils, and we're actively discussing that with county, district and city colleagues about how best to do that. So that's something that's not in our budget at the moment, but could create a windfall for us at some stage in the future. And final slide, I think, from me, please. Just to say, as I said, to reiterate, we are looking at all those things. We're working on a number of options around those themes, and the intention is we'll bring something back over the coming months in April. Not that they'll be implemented in April, but we'll have the ideas and a plan by that time. And obviously, the obvious point is if you get to a point where you can't meet your deficit through those plans, then we would have to look back at discretionary services again. But our hope and expectation is that won't be something we have to do, because we're going to work really hard on those themes that I've just set out. And at that point, Chair, thank you. I'll hand over to Dawn just to take us through the numbers.
Okay, thank you, Ed. So I'm starting off with some numbers there, and all of these are in your pack. So hopefully what I'm trying to do is just draw out some of the key points that will enable you to understand what those proposals are. So you'll see there, as Ed said, that in 22-23 we had a balanced budget, and in fact we were adding 383,000 to the Regen and Innovation Reserve following quite a healthy settlement. Moving forward with the MTFS, so we projected forward this time last year, and because of the proposals for new homes bonus to discontinue, the projection was for a deficit of just under £500,000 on the general fund at that point in time. When we drafted the budget, and at this point in time, the draft budget proposals without any growth in there has a deficit of just over 120,000. And the main reason for those changes between the base to the medium term financial strategy and then the point that we're at now is rising net expenditure that we've got to meet from those income levels, offset to some extent by increased investment income, and the fact that new homes bonus has continued for another year. And at the budget scrutiny, I was asked a question about how that base budget has moved across those 2 years. So how have we moved from a net budget of 5.1 million to just over 5.7 million, you know, an increase of 576,000. So being over 10% there. And really, apart from all the little movements that you've got up and downwards in some of those budgets, these are the really big ones. So we only budgeted for I think it was something like 2% or circa 2% pay award in 22-23, and of course we had a flat rate pay rise, which at some points on the spinal point represented an increase of 10%. I think the average was about 6%. So obviously that's not just in the extra that we had to pay in 22-23, that increase then rolls over again into 23-24 with a further pay award built into the estimates. So that additional amount across those 2 years was 376,000, and not just pay award, there's the additional contract inflation as well, with some of our contracts tied into certain indices around inflation, etc., and that added another 116,000. One of the other big movements was planning income, where we're seeing reduced income this year. We saw a little bit of reduced income last year, and we've done a lot of work tying that into the local plan, and the estimate for the baseline next year is reduction of income of 255,000 based on current planning fee levels. So if the government does, as has been muted, say that they will increase planning fees, then that would reverse some of that. And that's offset by a more healthily assumed in the budget, in the draft budget, leisure management fee, where we thought that that would be halved from 250 to 125, but the budget contains an assumption that that will continue at 250, which is now quite a key risk in terms of the budget, with a lot of discussions ongoing with the operator there, but the contract is for her 250,000 management fee. So that explains that big variation and how we've got to where we are now. And then on special expenses, Melton Mowbray. So again, a similar pattern. That's usually fairly static in terms of the cost of delivering services there. But again, inflation is biting there again. And the loss of income that we've seen and costs associated with the vacant cemetery lodge are also impacting on the budget, which has resulted in the fact that the deficit, which is met from the special expenses reserve, has increased to 66,000. And that does cause a lot of pressure on the special expenses as those reserves start to be depleted. And the projection is in about 2 to 2.5 years. If we continue at this rate, then there will be no more special expenses reserves, and we'll have to start to either make efficiencies or make savings similar to general fund, or we'll need to look at ways of raising income. Okay, you've got two growth proposals in your pack. First relates to general expenses, and that's an ongoing one relating to the conservation resource, and that turns your 120 deficit into 141,000. And then there's a one-off growth item on special expenses, Melton Mowbray, to extend the life of the cemetery through bringing back into use certain unused paths at the cemetery. And then that results, again, this is in your pack, in the following council tax levels. And you'll see there that the aim over there is for an overall increase of 2.99%, which is within the government's capping limits as set out in the draft, in the provisional finance settlement of 3%. So of course there'll be a discussion to be had if, when that final settlement comes out, they increase that referendum limit. There's been a lot of lobbying, particularly from district councils. The thrust of that lobbying has been that police are allowed to increase by a flat rate of £15. And that districts ought to be allowed to do the same. There's also been a lot of lobbying around that the capping referendum limit should apply to general expenses only and not include special expenses, which are more of a parish precept, seeing as parishes are not capped. I think that's probably unlikely this year, but it will be interesting if they increase that overall limit from the current £5 to 10 or 15. Okay. And then just future year projections. So the medium-term financial strategy takes that budget for 23-24 and then projects forward on a 3-year basis for future years. And you can see there, and this is a not a cumulative position. So if you address that 140,000 deficit next year, then that will reduce those deficits in those later years as well. So if you reduce that 317, then you've only got a further deficit of just over 200,000 there to address in the following year. And you can see the majority of that is down to, because we've kept government grants on a kind of fairly even basis, and that's because some of those speculations and projections around what the government might do with the funding has caused these wild swings and inaccurate predictions. So we've kept that fairly static. Rising council tax in line with the referendum limit, investment income in line with our Treasury Management Advisors projections, and then obviously net expenditure increasing by inflation, with an allowance in there for some of the known changes that we've got in certain services. And then similar pattern on special expenses future years, and you can see that deficit is projected to carry on. And as I say, you get to around about the end of 25-26, and there will not be a reserve fund anymore that we can use to fund that. So we need to think about the council tax position as we move forward, or look for savings. And we have done some sensitivity analysis, and that provides does end up with some quite wide variations from best to worst case scenario. The bulk of those projections are again around government grant variations and inflation, and it's really difficult, as I'm sure you'll appreciate now, to forward project what those inflations might be, what might happen to pay awards, etc. And that's what creates quite those large variations between best and worst case scenario. But you'll see there that the surpluses at the best case are quite modest, but the worst case scenario, the deficits are quite large. And then again, this is all in your papers, so quite a few risks and assumptions assumed in pulling together those estimates. Most of them I probably mentioned. I think the biggest risk now is around the leisure, because the budget does assume that that full management fee under the contract will be payable next year. So I think that is probably one of the biggest risks, and also the inflation one as well. But they're all set out in the pack. Since the last meeting that we had, one of the new things that's in the proposals is a recommendation relating to armed forces. This is something new that's not been discussed before, and members won't have had sight of before the papers that have come before you this evening. And that's really just to reaffirm what I can honestly assure you is a very long-standing policy, actually something that predates my time at the council, so it goes back quite a long time. And that's where the council had a policy, and always had a policy to disregard 100% of certain payments to war widows and widowers when determining council tax support and also housing benefits. That obviously some years ago was a larger amount, but the number of claimants has been reducing, and this represents a cost of around just over 16,000 in 21-22, has been picked up in a recent audit. Those members on the audit committee will recall I spoke about this last week, and what the auditors are saying is, could the council just reaffirm its policy that it wants to continue with this? I know in the past, when we probably in the noughties, when we brought this back to members, they were very keen to continue this. So there's a recommendation in the papers that go to Cabinet and Council just for you to restate that, should you wish to do so. And then moving on to capital, quite a modest programme being put forward with respect to general fund. Most of those, in fact, are funded either through external grants or through renewals and repairs fund proposals, so mainly focusing around equipment and disabled facilities grants. The other one is around the asset development programme, where members set aside some money, funded a phase one part of that work, and set aside some capital receipts to match fund some successful LEP funding. And what we're asking for as part of the budget is to actually put that into the capital programme, but there will be conditions around actually releasing that money, subject to business cases, etc. So again, this is all in the papers, so I won't go through them in a lot of detail. Again, we've forward projected what the reserves and balances would be based on the proposals in front of you up to the end of the 23-24 financial year. And you will see in there that that just means that because of that unbalanced budget and the assumption that we'll be using reserves to fund that, that you start to deplete your corporate priorities reserve, which is the main go-to reserve for funding any one-off initiatives. But the proposal is to increase that working balance to £1 million in line with the Local Government Association recommendations. I'm just going to move on to the HRA budget now. And again, all of these are contained in your papers. So you will see there that following the Housing Revenue Account business plan, proposal is to increase that working balance to, again, a minimum level of £1 million. And you'll notice in there as well that there's in the 23-24 budget, there is going to be a contribution from reserves to meet the aspirations set out within the asset management plan and the HRA business plan. But that's a kind of a pattern that you'll see over the 30-year life of the HRA business plan. Some years you'll be putting money into the reserves, and other years you'll be taking those out as you reach those kind of needs of repairing responsibilities. And then you'll notice again in your pack that the rent proposal is a 7% increase, which is capped one following government proposals for general needs housing, and CPI plus 1% for supported housing, which results in an average increase of 7.21% for Melton, with average rent being £86.05 per week. But with any relet, so those properties, so the protection is for tenants within a property. So should properties become void and be relet, then they'll be let at formula rent with a 5% tolerance. And just consideration of the affordability there, approximately 695 of our tenants are claiming housing benefit. And you'll notice in the proposals, there's a proposal there for a hardship fund using a voucher scheme. And then on the HRA, again, capital programme proposals there for 23-24. And this really nicely follows that HRA business plan and then the asset management plan. So we've got there the strategy, the condition surveys informing the asset management plan, and then that all rolling into what the proposals are for the capital programme for 23-24, entirely based on need, consultation, and being achievable and something that we can deliver against. And then there you've got a snapshot of what those HRA reserve balances are based on the revenue and capital proposals that you've got in front of you. And as I've said, those reserves will deplete in the years where there's a need to deliver certain housing improvements, and then they will increase in other years as well to make sure it's always in a balanced position. Don't think I probably particularly need to recap on that one. And then really, I suppose that again, just a summary really, again, COVID and now inflation pressures are what have impacted negatively on the budgets. That's what's causing the pressure and the challenge. And the budget is based on existing service levels and based on the corporate strategy. And as Ed, I think Ed's probably said as much as needs to be said about the financial sustainability plan and how we intend to address the deficit that's in the proposed budget. And then the next steps are obviously this evening, get your views. They will go on towards the Cabinet when they meet on the 8th of February. And then all of that will be rolled up with the reports, modified reports that you've got in front of you this evening, and sit alongside a council tax setting report to go to council at the end of February. We are waiting for the final finance settlement, and that might alter the figures slightly. But with you having that deficit position, that will probably just serve to hopefully reduce that. It's unlikely it would increase it. It's usually a slight benefit that you get when the final settlement comes out. So that'll probably just reduce that deficit slightly. And then really over to the discussion and the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. That was a very comprehensive report. So we'll look at agenda item 6. Hopefully you've looked at the report and have got any questions. I've just got a couple on page 34. .1.4 at the top. Can somebody, probably you, Pranali, is it? why have we got into this situation in the first place, which this backdated service charges? It makes me very worried because it says in the report, which if recovered would significantly improve that position further. Now, I do understand, is that right? The assumption is we're going to get the money and it's been inserted into your working papers. Is that right?
The assumption and that's to do with this year's current year, 22-23. Some of the backdated, so there's a backdated charge for business rates on Lake Terrace that has been included, but these have not been included. So these would be a bonus, but the other one's essential to end the year in line with the projection in this paper.
Do get this money. Why have we got into this situation? Why is it suddenly being put before us? Surely we have a spreadsheet with when items are due for review and increase it. Can you just talk me through this?
So obviously, as you know, we established a corporate property and assets team a couple of years ago. And since then, we undertook the review of service charges and leases within our ownership. And that work has brought in light this particular issue of backdating. These leases would have been agreed historically, and there were triggers that at some point in time in the past few years before my team's time that have been fallen off the radar. But that is exactly why the team is recruited to, and the work we are doing now is bringing out the issues. We are dealing with it. There is solid legal basis. The finance and legal team are working with the property colleagues to resolve it, and we have successfully invoiced in the last couple of weeks on a few of the occupiers, and we will continue to do so until everything is recovered. So the work, yes, it looks like it is negative to begin with, but in some ways it is quite positive that we are working on it as a team, organization-wide effort to recover and get the best value for the organization.
Are we convinced? How convinced are you that we are going to get this all the money? Because obviously it's going to be a boost for the finance section.
I think with any of this kind of backdated negotiations, we need to make sure that we are on solid legal grounds. And that's why the review of the leases is quite important by working with the legal colleagues, but also how our records have been kept over the past years. And that's where the finance team comes in, and they have been helping out and digging out all the information. So we are, for the invoices we have raised, we are absolutely 100% confident we will be able to get a positive result out of it. And we are going to continue working in that direction to make sure that we get the best result. But ultimately, this will be commercial negotiations. So yes, it will be subject to negotiations.
What are we talking about in pound, shillings and pence? What are you?
I haven't got the number at hand at this point in time, but I can get it for you.
Okay, right. And the other question is similar, really. Page 32. I think it's still one for you, Pranali. This 5-year recharge for the NNDR is now due from the contractor. Are we okay? Is that included in the figures?
The 142 it's the other one that isn't included.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Yeah. So is the contractor going to pay? Are we having any difficulties with any negotiation there?
So there were again a few issues with this collection. There was dilapidation claim and a few other things, property related items that we are working with the contractors on. I haven't heard that they are not going to pay, but it is an ongoing discussion. So we are quite hopeful it will be. But yeah, as I say, it's not concluded yet.
The two items I've raised could come back to scrutiny at some point. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, it might be a question for the Chief Executive, but given our financial situation, why was it deemed appropriate to create an additional Assistant Director post at a cost of £60,000?
Can you clarify which role you're referring to?
There's an SPF role that's been created.
So
Shared Prosperity Fund Assistant Director was created just before Christmas.
yeah, so there's a number of changes that have been approved recently in terms of structures and resourcing. So it's not an additional role in terms of headcount. There's a additional role or an amended role for regeneration, the focus for that area. And that's something that was approved alongside a number of other changes that were brought forward for both Dawn's directorate and for the corporate services directorate and for the housing and community directorate. So there isn't actually a net growth in overall costs, but we felt it was appropriate to have a corporate role responsible for leading that agenda, and that is a fully funded change as well through the UK SPF investment plan.
That's not actually in the paper, but it's a very fair question. Yeah, Councillor Chandler.
The Cemetery Lodge. I brought this up at the old CS&A committee on more than one occasion. How much would it cost to bring that up to a habitable standard? Because we're losing a lot of rent there. A house like that in one of my villages, it would bring in 10,000 a year or 12,000 a year. They're all £1,000 a month now, 2-bedroom houses. I mean, we should have a figure. We should have a figure of what it would cost to bring it up to standard. I mean, while it's empty, it's just deteriorating. I went by it this morning and I thought, how sad.
Director will answer that, please.
Thank you.
I think it's, without getting into too much detail in an open session, I don't think it's a question of bringing it up to standard. I think there's other legalities involved in that, but there are some proposals coming forward for the future of that property to Cabinet at the March meeting. But we can have a conversation outside of the meeting potentially.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Well, a new year this is, and obviously it's a new year with new issues. Obviously, I want to, as I already have, but I will in public congratulate the Chief Exec and the staff for getting a massive boost for Melton Mowbray in getting the grant they got. Unfortunately, we also live in a time, and I remember saying before Christmas, it's like a train coming down the line. And we were hoping we had a plan A, which was obviously a strategic partnership with Harborough, which for reasons best known to themselves, they decided to reject. We had a plan A, we need a plan B, surely. I think we have at the moment, as I understand it, at least 2 senior posts that haven't been replaced for nearly a year. We have a Director of Planning, we have Director of the Environmental Health, which Victoria Clark left a long while ago. And we now obviously have also in Customer Services a vacancy. I think we need to know as a council where we're going with those, because obviously I know that some of them were held back for obvious reasons. We were looking at sharing high posts with another partner possibly. But I think we've got to a stage now, we know where we are. Harborough have said no. We need to know what's going to happen to those posts, because I don't think it's fair to the staff who are sitting in planning or environmental health or even customer services to know where we're going with those posts and whether they're going to be shared or whether they're going to be back in post. And I would just question also, in these costs here that we've got in front of us, I'm making a quick all-rounder here. We've spent a lot of money on consultants. Obviously, you could say the planning was a consultants. Are those included in here, those costs? Because obviously the Harborough special strategic one, we employed a consultant for that. You know, all of those are costs we didn't think we were going to have up there, and now we have, which could add to our deficit in the coming months. I think it's important we now get a grip and have a new plan going forward. And what are we actually going to do to try and mitigate what is now something that beforehand, before Christmas, Dawn was quite rightly saying to us, we need this plan to survive. And now we haven't got one. Am I right in saying that, Dawn?
So any costs incurred are included in that forecast. Okay. Yeah, because ultimately budget holders should not commit an order and incur expenditure that they haven't got a budget for. So it might be that it's been moved from an underspend elsewhere, but the forecast includes all known costs in that year-end position. When you talk about a plan, I mean, in terms of addressing the deficit, you mean?
So could I just say what you're saying is Jim Worley, who his replacement is budgeted in this?
Yes, correct.
At the same level, at the same, so
Well, in
everything
terms of-
strategic and Victoria Clark's obviously.
Well, in terms
We
of
haven't been,
22,
it's just
23.
sorry, Dawn, we haven't been paying that for obvious reasons because we haven't got a Jim Worley, we haven't got a Victoria Clark. So I'm just saying, how does this work? Because going from now, this year's finances to next year's, you're assuming they're coming back, I think.
Right, in terms of 22-23, which is the current financial year, the forecast is based on costs incurred to date and what a budget holder projects forward they're going to incur. So if we've had a vacancy, that would be an underspend, and then if that is then used to pay for consultancy or temporary staff, then that is taken, that cost of that is taken into account as well on those forecasts. Then in any financial year, so for the 23-24 budget, we budget for the establishment in full based on estimated salaries levels. So that's the current salary plus an allowance for inflation. So those vacant posts will be budgeted for based on the approved salary level and grade for that post plus an inflation allowance. If we then don't fill that post with a permanent member of staff at that salary, and instead we have to buy agency or consultancy in, that could result, we either have to reduce the amount of time that we commission to fit with the budget, or we have to use an underspend or additional money from elsewhere to stick within the budget.
Just before I hand over to the chief executive to respond to that, how long can the council sustain paying £850 a day for a planning consultant? No, but I have done. So can you include that, Ed, in your response? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just to firstly pick up on the customer service point. So we have made an appointment to the customer services team leader. I believe they're due to start at the end of February. So that post is being filled. On the other two roles, we attempted to recruit to those posts, were unsuccessful. And as you know, that's one of the challenges that we face in certain areas, planning and environmental health particularly. And it was interesting, there was an LGA survey recently, and across the board, those two areas, those two specialisms are the areas that vex and concern, particularly district council, in trying to resource. So what we haven't done is just go straight back out again with the same role at the same salary and expect a different result. So that's where obviously we're exploring with Harborough the potential about doing something. And as we've said, whatever choice has been made around the strategic partnership doesn't negate the potential to still look at collaborative options. So that is something we can still do, and it's something we are still actively talking with them and others about. So we are looking both for potential options around planning and around environmental health. There are discussions that we're due to have with Cabinet in the coming weeks. So I would expect us to start to be able to move forward on those things. So to Dawn's point and to the comments about the cost, so clearly the cost of any external support on planning is not sustainable into the long term. It's not sustainable full time. but nor I think is it prudent just to go out on the same basis of what we've done before and expect a different result. That didn't work, and we know we need someone, you know, a very credible, capable lead to take on what's a really important area for us. So we have to get this right, and we won't knee jerk or jump into anything too quickly. So there are active proposals being developed. They will be brought forwards in due course and obviously discussed with Cabinet over the coming weeks. So I can assure the committee that is being worked on.
Before you move on, Ed, can I ask you when the asset development plan will start hitting, which could be a key item for scrutiny?
So we are expecting an update on an element of the asset development plan to come forward to Cabinet on the 8th of February. So the first step on that particular journey will come forward on the 8th of February.
I just wanted to say something about staff that Ed had alluded to. As part of my portfolio at county, I've got staff relations as part of my, and it's not just Melton, but every council's having difficulties with getting people, keeping them, and people just leaving. It's like an epidemic. So, you know, it's not just us, it's other councils.
On the general fund before we move on to the capital programme.
Yes, Chair. Can I just,
Yes, Steve.
just a bit of
Councillor
concerns on the vehicle expenses, Dawn. Right, is that the cost on the vans? Is that what the vehicles mean on the vans? What we use for grounds maintenance and caretaking and that?
Sorry, could you just tell me where you are on the
I can't find it on the agenda
oh, sorry, on the slide for the capital. Sorry, that
Yeah.
is on the capital, but
because I've got concerns about how much we're spending on the vehicle and how much it's costing a year.
okay, I mean, on the vehicles, we haven't actually bought vehicles for the environmental maintenance team for a number of years. We had that one stolen and I think we replaced that. But other than that, we've really not been replacing vehicles. We also had quite an out of date, what we call repair and renewal type program, where it estimated the life of those vehicles, what the residual value is, and worked out each year how much we had to pay for those. That was quite out of date. We've recently updated all of that and looked at, and we're spending a lot on repairs because those vehicles are end of life really, and that becomes inefficient, not just in terms of the costs, but in terms of service provision as well. So we've recently updated all of that estimation based on how long vehicles should last for when they start becoming uneconomical to run. Now we've got proposals coming forward to replace them in line with that programme. So I think that's been quite a solid piece of work done by the service area.
I'll just say, yeah, I understand that. But what I can't understand, why is the vehicles being taken home to Leicester, to Bottisford and all this costing on diesel and that? I think the vehicles should be staying on the premises somewhere locked up. And it's cost the council over, for amount of years. It's like the caretakers coming from Bottisford 4 times a day, nearly 80 miles a day, petrol, the wear and tear, the van's in for repair. That can't be cost effective for the council.
Shell, can you help tonight on that, or would you sooner respond to all members in a
So
few days?
I think it's important to separate out the procurement of vehicles as something that's required, and then how we manage the service. So I'm very happy to work with Pranali, and between us we can provide a response on the operational arrangements to the committee if that's helpful.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Should just go back a little bit. The consultants that we have, do we always have a thought of whether we employ local consultants or whether they are from a long way away, and do the consultants, when they charge for travelling as well? Because quite frankly, for planning, I think we probably ought to ask Mr. Worley back. He doesn't live very far away, does he? And he actually does always answer questions. As something that probably the planning officers don't now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there might be some confusion here about taking vans home, etc. Are we referring to Biffa or to the council? Because
I think it's the council, not the.
well, I don't know what vehicles come back to Bottisford. There's certainly a man lives who is an employee of Biffa, lives in the village I live in, Mosson, and he picks up the pink bags and things en route and often brings new bins in when people get damaged bins and they're replaced. So I don't think we should actually say that it's all wasted diesel and stuff.
No, I think that comment of Councillor Chandler's to be included in Michelle's and Prinali's joint response. And could that go out to all members, please?
Yeah, just putting on that through, it's the caretaker what lives in Boxford. What's coming backwards and forwards, locking up at night, coming back and forward about 80 miles a day. Martin. That's 4 times a week.
I think that you've made the point, Steve. So can we move on to the next item? So are we all pardon? So the scrutiny committee notes the report, and I will provide a comment to cabinet for them to consider it. So let's move on to the capital programme, agenda item 7. Any comments on that paper? The only comment I have is page 75, the DFG. Any underspend likely to be carried forward, but there's a possibility that's got to go back unspent to the provider. Is that, and we'd lose that money? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we will try to. I know Michelle's looking at a range of options that we can use that underspend for, being more innovative and working with partners. But ultimately, if we do have, there could be the risk that we have to pay that back.
On item 7, the capital programme. Any other questions on that? This is specifically the general fund. No. Okay. Thank you. The scrutiny again notes the report, and I'll provide the comments to cabinet for them to consider. And finally, agenda item 8 is the revenue budget for the HRA. Of course, we have had the business plan. It's been it's certainly taken the majority of the questions out of the forum, so it was money well spent, and it's been a big plus for not only cabinet but ourselves and the officers. Any questions? What have I got? Oh yes, page 127. The interest in this one is 5.3 is this one-off hardship fund for the council's tenants to help with the cost of living, and this is going to be in the form of a voucher. Now, I welcome a hardship fund. I think it is necessary, but I think audit have got to be involved here, because what is this idea? How will we know whether it is being spent on the purpose it's meant for? Is there a scheme? Are we checking that it makes a difference? And what's going to be the policy? Can you help me on that? Whilst I welcome it, I think a bit more information for members.
Thank you. Yes, and one of the things you'll notice within the recommendations is there will be a delegation to myself as a director with the portfolio holder to develop the detailed criteria around this scheme. And the reason for that is we just want to take our time to understand what good practice is out there. There are various schemes across the country that are starting to emerge. We've had a look at various options from crediting rent accounts through to, you know, cash options for residents. And we feel that the safest way forward and the most appropriate way forward is vouchers, but even that isn't as straightforward because it depends where people live and what their needs are. So we need to have sufficient flexibility. But we also need to recognise that £50,000 that is proposed is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money. And so we will need to really think carefully about who would benefit, making sure that we've exhausted all of the other options that are available. So, for example, the Household Support Fund, and making sure that any support that we provide is accompanied by proper support and wraparound support to our tenants. So still some work to do on that, and we'll need to work it through. I absolutely welcome the role of audit in making sure that that money is spent appropriately and that it is making a difference. One of the things that we will make sure does not happen is it will not be used to credit rent accounts, because then we risk disadvantaging those tenants who are struggling and perhaps are in rent arrears, and we need to think very carefully about the support that's provided to them. But having a hardship fund, I know the portfolio holder is very keen that this is something we do, because we do know that the cost of living crisis is impacting our residents, and we know that that rent increase, whilst necessary to make sure that our HRA remains viable, is going to impact on those residents who don't have a safety net, for example, universal credit or housing benefits. So I think that's all I can say this evening, Chair, if that's okay. But we will detail that criteria, and that will go through in the form of a decision notice, which you would see the details of, and we will publish that, and we will also engage our tenants to work through the criteria. I hope that helps.
Thank you. The only other point is which is coming back to scrutiny is the debt rent collected for housing arrears and housing rents and the garage rents. Just to give members a flavour, because it's not really for the discussion tonight, but garage rents, for instance, I've since discovered we've got 36 cases totaling £18,000. Now, the largest of these cases is 2,500, just over 2,500. Well, it's what, £8 a week. So clearly we need action, and not just on that one, but all the others. They do not need to go to court. We can handle it. We can send a 7-day letter out, and they can be issued, if they don't pay, with notice to quit. So that could be a quick win on the garage rents. We've got to, you know, stop being an easy landlord, but that's just a flavour. And on the house rents, the number of tenants now owing is 627, and there's still 605,000. And I will expand on this a cabinet tomorrow, and also when it comes back to scrutiny in April, because sundry debtors, garage rents and housing rents are coming back to see what progress, and they have got a strategy, but it's not for tonight, I don't believe. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. One thing leads to another. 5.5, and then at the top, water arrears, and it says the agency with Severn Trent Water. Can I ask, and that seems that's all right. That's all right. Can I ask, with the big hole in Thorpe Road and all the problems that have been there, is there going to be a cost from Severn Trent to this council? And also on the top Scorford Road, which is now supposed to be going to be closed for over 6 weeks. As the ward councillor, I've not been notified, but apparently, and the mess that it's making in Scorford as well. I just would like to know if anybody does know if there is going to be a cost to this council.
Well, there won't be a cost, councillor Holmes, because it falls under the highways, which is run by the county council. Yeah, so there will be no charge to Melton Borough Council.
And there won't be any charge to all the people in Stafford Avenue and all those avenues that have got their
I
cars.
can't say how the
No.
county will deal with it,
No,
but
no.
I'm sure they'll have had any complaints that are likely to be go forward.
It ha-
Thank-
I just wonder how we're going to deal with the Top Scorford Road, because they're not using that road all the time. They're not, you can get through at some times and it's really very difficult. And we're talking about the environment.
Yeah.
Well, if you saw all the little roads off, they're just chewed up. They're a real mess.
I'm sure the respective county councillor is probably the person to move this forward, because it's not a service we provide. So I'm sure that it's already moved on.
He's tried, but he hasn't got very far.
Sorry, who's that?
The one for the Brian Lovegrove.
Oh, right. Okay. There's nothing more I can add on that. Councillor Chandler.
Councillor Holmes has said, my son got caught in this yesterday. No signage at all till you get there and there's a barrier and you can't go any further. He'd got a cattle truck behind, towing a cattle truck, and he had to reverse quite a way until he found a gateway that he could actually get into to reverse. And then there's still nothing in Scorford. There's nothing in Scorford tonight to redirect the traffic. Unless you actually know it's closed, everybody's still careering on and then having to turn around. I mean, what are the county doing about this?
I don't know. So,
Well, I think somebody ought to take a grip of it. Because
yeah, well, I'm sure that if you've been on to Councillor Lovegrove, he'll have to drive that forward. Councillor Chandler, there's nothing we can do. It's not our responsibility. Councillor Evans, did you want to?
Yeah, thank you. If I could move on to, obviously we've got the 5-year capital programme in front of us on page 121. When we combine this with what we were saying earlier, my question has to be on climate change. Are these investments thought through? Because it would be easy, I'm trying to say, with the windows or the boilers or whatever, it would be dead easy to go for a cheap option, arguably, which has, efficiency, not very good gains. Are we looking at it and making certain that we put good enough investment in, even if it means more expensive on a boiler, to make certain that the efficiency gains on it for the resident and us are significant? Because that has to be the balance, because it would be easy for us to just buy the cheapest boiler with, I don't know, condensing boiler, which is some sort of game, but and the windows and all the rest of it. But surely we should be looking and weighing up the cost of investing, say, in triple glazing or whatever now, so that in future the benefit will be to the climate. Thank you.
Can you help us there, Michelle, please? Thank you.
No problem. So from the work we've done with the committee, you'll recall that climate and environment's been a really key consideration through both the business plan and the asset management plan. And that's one of the reasons that the replacement of the aluminium windows is being accelerated to really help tenants with household costs and energy efficiency. What I will do, Councillor Evans, is make sure I discuss that with the team to make sure that when we're procuring that's a really key consideration as part of that. I guess the other thing just to remind the committee of, and this goes back to the scrutiny discussion we had on the asset management plan, is sometimes there is a trade-off to be had between reducing household bills and the energy efficiency. I know we've had a discussion about accelerating the storage heater programme, for example, and that is a balance and a consideration we have to have all the way through. And the other thing just to say again to the committee is that in order to reach the aspirations of the council around carbon reduction in relation to housing, it will require external funding, and that is something we commit to trying to secure all the way through, and that's no different for any other landlord across the country. So it's really important. There is always a balance to be struck, and I'm confident that that's embedded into that plan.
Thank you very much. Any more questions before we close the meeting? No. So the recommendation is that scrutiny notes the report, and I'll provide the comments to Cabinet for them to consider. Item 9, there is no urgent business, so I'm going to close the meeting at 8 o'clock.